Hey, so for many of you that know, we received the Forgotten Realms books that Wizards of the Coast have put out, both physical form and digital format. But when they've announced the Forgotten Realms books, they also said that there were going to be some digital exclusive content that we'll be able to get in the form of three, I think they call it expansions. And I wanted to take a look at these to talk to you a little bit about what's in there, just kind of give a brief overview of what's in the table of contents. I've look through them and skim through some of these to kind of give my thoughts and feedback on this and see if this is worth the price of what they're charging. Now, you can buy these individually, from what I understand. Each one of the expansion packs that we're going to go through are $14.99 each. You can also get it as part of the digital bundle, which, this is a little bit of a misnomer because it's a bundle, but you're not getting a discount for it. You're pretty much paying for everything that's in the bundle at face value. You're not getting a discount or anything like that. But I thought we can go through and see what's in there and is it worth the $14.99 and talk about that. So the three books that they have in here for the digital expansions are Astarion's Book of Hungers, which makes a lot of sense. Baldur's Gate 3 is really huge. Astarion's a great character. I know people have feelings about Astarion, but I personally think Astarion's a great character, but it's a very popular character as well, too. So I think that makes sense. Netheril's Fall, I think, is really honing in on some nostalgic people who remember having Netheril in the previous editions of Forgotten Realms, if I remember correctly. But this is one that I think is a little bit new. That's not in the original, or I'm sorry, not in the Forgotten Realms books for Heroes of Faerun and Adventures in Faerun. They talk about it, but this stuff that's in the expansion is not in the book. And then we have Lorwyn First Light, which is Forgotten Realms adjacent. It's technically in the Feywild. They connected to the Moonshade Isles a little bit. And a lot of people that see Lorwyn will recognize this as the Magic the Gathering setting. From what I understand, this is not exactly Magic the Gathering setting. It's just inspired by it, but it lives in the domain of Delight, which is kind of like a region within the Feywild. So let's go ahead and take a look at each of these books and kind of do a breakdown of these here real quick. So Astarion's Book of Hunger. So in this expansion, we have 4 chapters, which all of them have, I think, about 3 or 4 chapters in each one of these. So chapter 1 is vampiric character options. So they do go through and talk, give you some new backgrounds, which I think the backgrounds are interesting. I think some of them are really cool ideas. I think some of them are okay. The character species Dampier, this is something that we have before, and this is just the updated version of it. I think the updated version is just fine. And then we get a whole list of feats. There's a lot of feats in here that I think a lot of these are really interesting, especially if you're wanting to run something that is vampire centric or has that theme with it. We have some origin feats in here, which again, the Vampire Hunter and Vampire's Plaything works really well with that vampire theme. So if you want to be a vampire hunter, this is a really good one to pull in, especially if you're doing like Curse of Strahd or something like that. Then we have a lot of general feats, which a lot of people talk about Lightbringer being an interesting one because that is one where it gives you an ability to cast, I think, the light cantrip, but you can make it be a sunlight source. And you can only do it, I think, once per day. But that ends up being a little bit of a problem with running vampires because then it's kind of like a nice little boon at a really, really low cost, basically. So which I say low cost, it's once a day, but you get the idea that that's something that I think DMs are going to kind of be divided about in terms of what they think about that general feat being in a vampire source. Chapter 2, Creatures of the Night. So these are brand new monsters that we're getting, as well as kind of a background on Cazador Zar's family. If you're not familiar with Cazador, that is Astarion's vampire. Sorry, I forget the technical term for it, but the person who he is the person that, put in the comments whatever this is, because obviously I know I'm trying to say it. I can't remember the term, but sire or something like that, right? But the person that caused Astarion to become a vampire. So Cazador is like the main vampire that is connected to Astarion. Astarion served him for the longest time until the events of Baldur's Gate 3, which, by the way, all this actually takes place before Baldur's Gate 3, but you can run it after Baldur's Gate 3. And there's one character in there that they say that if you're running this after the events of Baldur's Gate 3 that you want to change the characters. And for me, I'm not entirely sure why that is. I'll look at the character real quick, and maybe somebody in the comments can tell me why this might be the case, but it's kind of interesting. But the idea here is that this actually takes place before the events of Baldur's Gate 3. But anyways, Creatures of the Night, we get brand new monsters that is connected to vampires or hellish fiends, because Cazador is a worshiper of Mephistopheles, and so that's the connection they have there with those devils. They're very interesting. I think they're really cool. I think there'd be a lot of fun to run. And then Chapter 3, Adventures with Astarion. All three of the books are going to be providing adventures that are very similar to what we've seen in the Adventures in Faerun, as well as the Dungeon Master Guide. They're more like an adventure outline or quest outline, whatever you want to call it. They're not a full-on adventure written that you might find in something like Lost Mine of Phandelver or Curse of Strahd or Vecna Eve of Ruin. Those are not campaign books. These are not meant to be campaigns. They're just meant to give you something as a starting point, and then you expand out and fill out the details. And so these adventures, as is, I like them because I think they give you a starting point. Some dungeon masters do not like it because they want a lot more lore. Some people just don't enjoy just having something bare bones. I think having something to begin with, I think, is a really good idea. That's not a full-out adventure, but I know there's a lot of debate on that and a lot of different feelings and everything. I think, it's not for every DM, and I agree with that. I don't think it's ideal for brand new DMs who haven't run games before or anything like that. But I think for what it is, I think it's good enough. I think having an outline and having like some plot points to work with, I think works well. Looking at these adventures for Astarion, I think these are actually good. They all take place in a tavern and inn in Baldur's Gate called Rat's Run. The nice thing about this adventure is that they give you a really cool map, which I'll show you here in a second. That I think the map is fantastic, and they give you a breakdown of each of the areas in Rat's Run. But they give you, I think, 3 adventures that you can run here as well too. Family Outreach and Wayward Son. That might actually be the only adventures that they give you. But Rat's Run, Tavern Inn. If I can pull this up here, I'll show you what the map looks like, so that way you get an idea of what's in here. But I think it's a really cool map. Well, let me go down. I think it's probably further down a little bit. Yeah. I really like this map. I think it's really cool. This is something I can plop in to any adventure and run with. What I really like about this is that it gives you kind of front view that you can show to your players. And again, if you're planning on playing this is a spoiler warning. So, do not watch this if you're planning on running this. But what I like here is that they make it a little bit clear that this is this area right here is the first floor, not the second floor. I'm really glad that they made this design because it was a little hard to be able to distinguish that sometimes. But this is really cool. I think this is a Schley map, which they make. Yeah, Schley. He makes fantastic maps, and so this is really cool. I really like this, and the adventures just kind of run in this, and they give you an idea of like what typically happens in this area as well too. So I really like this. I think this is really cool. I enjoy this. The character I was mentioning before, let me see, Leaf Cloudswell. This says specifically here, if your game takes place after the events of Baldur's Gate 3, another individual from the Rat's Run Managers table should oversee the establishment. I don't know why that is. If somebody who is a big Baldur's Gate 3 fan, especially Astarion, if you know why, I've done a Google search. This character does not show up. So I don't know why they're suggesting that. If anyone has an idea or understands this, please let me know and put that in the comment or reach out to me. I just don't know. I have no idea why they were suggesting that. So anyway, so that is Astarion's Book of Hunger. Which I think is really cool, fantastic, great for people who are fans of Baldur's Gate 3 and fans of Astarion. I think this is definitely a well worth adventure. As I read through it, I really liked a lot of stuff in here. Again, there's some stuff I'm like, kind of, but overall, I really like all the stuff that's in here. The next book in here is Netheril's Fall, which takes place in the land of Netheril. Now, currently, if I'm not mistaken, in the Forgotten Realms and these published books take place in 1501 Dale Reckoning, and Netheril does not exist as is. So you're probably wondering, well, why is there Netheril's Fall in this? How can I play adventures in here? This is kind of a time travel type of theme that they have. And so right off the bat, if you're a fan of time travel, this is going to be a really good one. And they explain lore wise why that makes sense. And reading through it, I think it's really cool. And I think, this is a fun one if you enjoy time travel. If you don't enjoy time travel, this is probably not something that you'll be interested in. I think there are a couple other cool things in here that is really worth mentioning that I think is of interest. If you're not a fan of time travel, I think there are some other things in here that you can use in your other games. But by and large, the adventures and things about them themselves are about time travel. So it might not be worth it just on the other things alone if half the stuff that's in here is something that you're not interested in. But they do a good job of kind of explaining the history of Netheril. They go into specific areas in Netheril, specifically Alionar. I don't know how to pronounce that correctly, but this is tied to Karsus, which, again, if you're a Baldur's Gate 3 fan, you know who Karsus is. And Conch, not entirely sure how to pronounce that either, so I apologize. But they give you some more details about those areas. The only thing that I want to point out is that they do reuse a map that was created back in 2007, which I think is like 3rd edition or 4th edition time. So they are reusing a map, which is not uncommon. I don't know how people would feel about a map being reused for a D&D Beyond only, by the way. This is only on D&D Beyond, so you can't purchase this as a PDF or in a book format. You can only access this in D&D Beyond, which I think is something I'm going to talk about in terms of, is this worth the cost and stuff like that. But the fact that this is only D&D Beyond, some people I think are going to be disappointed that they're reusing the map. I'm a little disappointed because I like to see like updated stuff, but I think it's also one of those things where they recognize that this is, probably something that is kind of nostalgic for people who played in Forgotten Realms of previous editions. So they're probably pulling that in. And from what it sounds like, and from what it looks like, they updated that classic map with some like new things or corrections or stuff like that. So it's not completely reused, but it is a map that was created before. But that being said, there's a bunch of great art in here that is brand new. So that's just something I wanted to point out. But you have information about Netheril here. You have magic anomalies, which there's environmental effects, which I think is really, really cool. These are things I was looking through this. I was like, I would love to use this in some other parts of my games and in other worlds and stuff like that, because I think it's fantastic with what they have here, just to kind of give you an idea of different kinds of magical zones that might impact the characters and make it a challenge. And then they have through the time gauge, which kind of tell you a little bit about what the time gates are. And then they give you a couple of areas of what where the time gates can be located at. And then they have Escape from the Past. These are the 3 adventures you can run that are time travel focused. And again, these are adventures outlined, so they're not fleshed out. They have the story background, the hooks, and then the 3 encounters and the conclusion, which is what they're kind of creating all their adventure outlines for something like this. So again, if you're not a fan of that outline, or not a fan of time travel, this might be something that you might not be interested in, but I really enjoy it. I think the magic items are actually really cool in here. I was looking through this and I thought this is really neat, and I would love to use this in my game sometime. And then they have some new beasts in here as well too, which they all also look really cool. So so overall, I like this, but it's definitely a specific kind of flavor and theme that may or may not hit well for you. Last and not least, we got Lorwyn First Light, which again is inspired by the setting for Magic the Gathering. It is not exactly the setting. It is a domain of the light in the Feywild. And so similar to what we've had before, this we have kind of like an introduction to what is the Lorwyn Shadowmoor. We have Lorwyn Shadowmoor Origins, so we have some new backgrounds that they're giving us. A couple of feats, Child of the Sun and Shadowmoor Hexer, which this one is pretty much leaning into the Hex and what you could do with it. This is one that I think Dungeon Masters might want to just pay attention to a little bit, because for a feat, it might be something that gives you a little bit more than what you might be expecting. I think it's an origin feat as well, too, if I remember correctly. So as an origin feat, it's actually pretty powerful. And then they have something called adapting species. So these are species that have that already exists in Dungeons and Dragons, but they have additional lineages, from what I understand. So like elves have a couple more lineages, fairies exist, Kithkin, Flamekin, Bogarts, however you want to pronounce it. And then we have 2 brand new species that they added in here, Lorwyn Changeling and Rimkin, if I remember that's how you pronounce it, or Rhymekin, not entirely sure. And then we have a Gazetteer, this is pretty similar to what we had before in like Netheril's Fall. I'm not entirely sure why they call this a gazetteer, and then Netheril's Fall they don't really call it that. Like if I go back here, and when you look at these two areas here, like this is probably a little bit more broad, and so it's something to think about in terms of with the gazetteer, that's specifically these locations and not some of the other things. So that's probably why it's not called a gazetteer, but it gives you information about these areas. And then we have new beasts specifically for this, for the Shadowmoor, Lorwyn, Lorwyn, Shadowmoor areas. And then we have, again, adventures that you can use as well, too. So those are the 3 expansions that we have here. So let's talk about this a little bit. Each expansion is worth $14.99 each for a total of $44.97. And again, as I mentioned before, with the digital bundle, you're not getting a savings. It's just being included on it. You could definitely buy these individually. So if you want to buy these individually, is it worth the $14.99 for each one? And I did a little bit of math, and this is just an estimation, so take this with a grain of salt. But I kind of compared how much you are paying per dollar, like how many words you're paying per dollar that's worth, and compared it to Adventures of Faerun. I don't know if this is a close estimation or comparison that we want to have. If you have a better idea of how to do this, then definitely let me know. But I'm going to kind of break this down to you for you in terms of what it is, how many words per dollar, and how that compares to what we get in the Adventures of Faerun. So for the Astarion's Book of Hunger, it has a total of, and again, this is estimation, just so don't hold this against me if I'm incorrect or miscounted or anything like that. But it's 10,928 words for $14.99, so that's 729 words per dollar. Netheril's Fall is roughly about 18,000 words, so that gives us about 1,200 words per dollar. And then, Lorwyn First Light is 13,900 words for about 928 words per dollar. Okay, so looking at those things. Altogether, when you combine that, that's about 42,875 words for all 3 supplements. When you take that and divide it by $44.97, that's about 953 words per dollar that you're getting for all 3 of them. So that's $45, right? For Adventures in Faerun, if you get the digital supplement for that, I believe that is $40. Adventures in Faerun, yeah. So it's going to be about $5 more to get the expansions here. But for Adventures of Faerun, it's roughly about 139,000 words at $39.99 the price. We're looking at about 3,474 words per dollar. So that is a huge difference from getting the Adventures of Faerun book versus the digital expansions here. So the question is it worth it? On face value, I would say I think that's way too high of a price for $14.99 for a couple of reasons. One, this is a D&D Beyond exclusive, which means that you can only get it through their platform. I would understand if you can get it elsewhere and they're charging that much and making sure they're charging like other places as well too, probably. I'm not an economist or not in this industry, so I could be wrong. So again, if you're in the industry, if you have a familiarity with it, then definitely let me know. But that just seems like that's way too high a price, especially when something that is exclusive to D&D Beyond that you can't use anywhere else. And for the terms of service, I don't even know if you're technically allowed to copy and paste and use it, even for your own personal use. Maybe you can. I know that, ends up being some kind of a gray area a little bit. But if you can, then, you're still buying it on D&D Beyond for it, but you can't buy it anywhere else. So $14.99 at that breakdown, I think is a little bit too much for me. I would like to see it more if they continue to do this, make it like $10. I think $10 is a lot more reasonable, especially when you compare it to how much you're paying per dollar, how many words per dollar you're paying for it. I think $10 makes a lot more sense than $14.99. I do think it's worth it if you like these themes. If you're a fan of Baldur's Gate 3 and Astarion, I think it's definitely worth it. I think there's a lot of stuff in there that you can run. I think it gives you like some really cool stuff. So if you enjoyed that individually, I think it's definitely worth it. If you're somebody that enjoys Netheril, from previous editions, or just like that area, or you enjoy time traveling, I think, again, individually, it'll be worth it if you like those specific things. But if it's something that like across the board, you're like, I could take it or leave it, it may not be worth the $14.99 for you. So those are my thoughts about the digital expansions here. The last thing I want to touch base on is with the digital bundle. As I mentioned, this is not something that gives you savings if you buy all these things individual. They're just bundling it together for you. So don't think that when you look at this like, oh, this is a discount. No, they're just like putting it all together so you can just makes it easier for you to buy all of them instead of having to go in and buy it individually. So you're still paying at face value. So you get the Adventures of Faerun, the Heroes of Faerun. You get the digital map pack usable only on Maps VTT. I tell you what, I don't use Maps VTT because I prefer Owlbear Rodeo specifically. If they were to sell this as something that I could download, I would get behind that. I'm not a fan of the fact that this is only available on Maps VTT, and I get why they're doing it, but I would definitely pay that much. If I didn't get the bundle already, I would definitely buy the $5.99 if I can use it in my own games. Hell, even $10. I think $10 to use for other virtual tabletops for the Baldur's Gate 3 digital map, especially like I think it comes with like 4 or 5 maps if I remember correctly, which is straight from the gear. Like they have Aunt Ethel's lair, which again it doesn't give you an entire lair, but it gives you an area. It has like the Mind Flayer's ship if I remember correctly, the Nautiloid, a couple other things as well too. Like those are straight from the game. I would definitely buy that for $10. So I wish they would do more to allow you to have these things and put it in your own games wherever you're playing them at, as opposed to making things exclusive on D&D Beyond. Let's see here, the digital dice pack, the expansions we talked about, the Atlas of Faerun, a digital map of the entire Faerun continent in D&D Beyond Compendium and Maps VTT. The Atlas of Faerun is already in the digital book, if I remember correctly. So if you only bought the Heroes of Faerun book, I think the Atlas of Faerun already shows up in there. So that's kind of like a teaser. It's not really like something that like they're trying to attract you by showing that off, but it's not something that you're getting in addition to this because you're already getting it if you buy a Heroes of Faerun book by itself. I could be wrong though. Maybe I'm seeing it because I bought the digital bundle, but maybe if you bought the Heroes of Faerun book only, then maybe that doesn't come with it. But my guess is that is just kind of a highlight to try to entice you to get it, even though it already comes with it and you get it by itself anyway. So anyway, so those are my thoughts about the 3 expansive pack. Do I think it's worth the $14.99 by itself on face value? I don't think it's worth it. I think if you are somebody that's teetering on buying these individually, I would say if you're not somebody that is interested in Baldur's Gate 3 or Astarion, or if you're not interested in the area of Netheril or Lorwyn, I would say definitely pass on those things. I don't think you're going to be missing out on anything if you don't get those. Those are things that are definitely thematic that comes with it, and so unless you have a strong interest in doing something with those things, I don't think personally it's worth the $14.99. Only if you enjoy the themes that they're going to be giving you, I think is definitely something that could be interesting, could be worth it for you. But on face value, I don't think so. So let me know what you think. Definitely leave comments and tell me your thoughts or anything that I asked about. If you know the answers to, please give me your feedback on those, and I'd love to hear back from you. So as always, go reckless or go home, and have a great day.